when you look into a mirror, there's this uh, deeply ingrained biological expectation of what's going to happen next.
Yeah, totally predictable.
Right. It's just a reflection. You raise your hand, the glass raises its hand.
Yeah.
But I want you to imagine for a second that you look into that mirror, and before you even move a single muscle, your reflection just smiles at you.
Oh, man.
And then it steps out of the frame entirely and, asks you how your day was.
Yeah.
I mean, it's thrilling on one level, sure, but on a much deeper level, it is just profoundly unsettling.
Well, yeah, because it completely shatters the boundary we've always maintained between, an object and an entity. In that scenario, you're suddenly not looking at a reflection of yourself or like a mechanical tool anymore. You're looking at a presence. And human beings, we just aren't wired to easily distinguish between a simulated presence and a real one.
Which makes that unsettling thrill incredibly relevant today. So welcome to the Deep Dive. It's Tuesday, June 30, 2026, and our mission today is to explore this massive collision of cutting-edge technology, the so-called loneliness economy, and the really profound ethical questions surrounding artificial intimacy.
Yeah, that's a huge topic.
And we're looking at this today specifically because today marks a milestone that, honestly, it sounds like it belongs in a sci-fi novel, but it is entirely real. We are talking about the official launch and mass production of the world's first full-size, hyper-realistic, humanoid robot companions.
It's wild, and we're working through a really fascinating stack of sources to make sense of this for you. We've got the breaking news and technical specs from UBTech's U1 robot launch today.
Right.
We're pairing that with a Cornell University engineering study on soft robotic skin. And finally, a deeply critical research paper out of Chalmers University that questions the very concept of creating what they call responsible humanoids.
Okay, let's unpack this because, setting the spec sheets aside for just a moment, the sheer scale of the launch numbers dropping today tells a massive story about societal demand.
Oh, absolutely. The demand is fundamentally shifting the whole industry landscape right now. So, UBTech opened pre-orders for their UWorld U1 series earlier this month on June 2nd.
Okay.
And leading up to today's launch, they have racked up over 13,361 pre-orders across all their channels.
Wait, 13,000?
Yeah, over 13,300. And to put that figure in its proper context, you have to look at the entire global market from just last year. In 2025, the total number of humanoid robot shipments globally from literally every company combined was roughly 18,000 units.
So you're saying in less than 30 days, a single company has pre-sold a volume that's equivalent to about, 70% of the entire global market's output from the previous year?
Exactly. That is the sheer scale of the acceleration here. And for an even more direct comparison, UBTech themselves, they only sold 1,079 full-size humanoid robots in all of 2025.
Wow. Okay, so that points to an absolute explosion in demand, which honestly makes the price tag on these units even more astonishing. Because I was looking at the numbers, and the flagship model, the U1 Ultra, it is priced at 880,000 yuan for the female version.
Right.
And the male version is priced even higher, sitting at 990,000 yuan. We are talking about roughly 146,000 US dollars.
Yeah, it's a massive investment. Now, they do offer lower tier models. There's a lightweight half-body version called the U1 Lite for about 119,800 yuan. And then a standard full-body U1 Pro for 169,800 yuan.
Okay, but still.
Right, but the pre-order data clearly shows that the demand for those premium million yuan models is incredibly robust.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the value proposition for the consumer here.
Yeah.
Because spending $1 million yuan, that's akin to buying a high-end luxury sports car.
Oh, easily.
But if I buy a sports car, it physically transports me. It does the job. The U1 Ultra has a battery life of, 2 to 4 hours?
Yeah, about that.
And the services explicitly note that it cannot do household chores. It can't cook. It can't scrub your floors. It can't even fold your laundry.
Not at all.
It is marketed strictly to adults for emotional companionship. So why would someone pay the equivalent of a house down payment for a machine that essentially just talks, listens, and dances?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it actually begins to make a lot more economic and social sense. The target market here isn't someone looking for like a really smart vacuum cleaner.
Right.
You have to look at the demographic realities in China right now, where there are currently around 200 million single adults.
200 million.
Yeah. And among the younger demographics, the sources note this growing cultural embrace of they call it a no marriage, no kids for safety mindset. There is an active avoidance of traditional family structures.
So it sounds like they're weighing the cost of traditional milestones against the cost of this new technology.
Yeah.
Because the sources mention the financial burden of betrothal gifts in China, right?
Hmm.
Which in some of the high-cost areas can peak around 500,000 yuan.
Yeah.
So while 990,000 yuan is incredibly expensive, I mean, it's double those sky-high betrothal gifts. People are basically running a completely different kind of cost-benefit analysis.
They are. They're weighing financial cost against emotional predictability. Think about it. A traditional marriage involves immense financial output, sure, but it also carries emotional risk, right?
Yeah.
Compromise, potential conflict.
Messy human stuff.
Exactly. For the demographic that can actually afford a U1, they are choosing to invest their capital in an AI partner that is totally predictable, non-argumentative, and tailored entirely to their specific preferences. They're purchasing certainty in a very uncertain social landscape.
They're buying an emotional guarantee. Like a relationship where they're always the priority and they never ever have to compromise.
Right. And UBTech is taking a massive financial gamble to facilitate that exact guarantee. The company has posted losses for 6 consecutive years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a deficit totaling over 5.6 billion yuan. They are betting the entire future of their enterprise on the premise that this loneliness economy represents a rigid demand scenario.
Meaning what exactly?
Well, in macroeconomic terms, rigid demand usually applies to things like food or basic housing, things people will buy regardless of price changes because they literally need them to survive. UBTech is basically betting that artificial companionship is the first rigid demand in human history with absolutely no upper limit on its emotional and therefore financial value.
Wow. But, I mean, to get someone to spend 1 million yuan on a rigid demand for connection, the illusion of life has to be absolutely flawless. Like a mannequin on wheels isn't going to cure loneliness.
Oh, definitely not.
The engineering has to bridge the uncanny valley, that weird space where something looks almost human but is just slightly off enough to be super creepy.
Yeah, bridging that valley requires an immense amount of synchronized technology. So the U1 relies on highly precise movement. The robot has 88 degrees of freedom across 14 core joints.
Break that down for me. What is a degree of freedom in this context?
A degree of freedom essentially refers to an independent direction in which a joint can move. So having 88 of them allows the robot to mimic about 90% of basic human movements. It moves away from those stiff robotic jerks to much more fluid organic motions.
Okay.
The launch materials even showcase the robot partnering with human dancers to perform routines from the movie La La Land.
Which is impressive. Fluid movement is crucial. But where the illusion usually breaks down for me, anyway, is in the interaction speed. If I ask a question and the machine just stares blankly at me for 3 seconds while it processes a response, the illusion of a presence instantly evaporates.
Yep. The lag ruins it. And UBTech addresses that latency issue using what they call a fast-slow brain architecture.
And this concept is fascinating because it directly mimics human biology. I mean, think about how you operate on a daily basis. If you accidentally place your hand on a hot stove, you don't stand there and calculate the thermal dynamics of the metal.
Right. You'd burn yourself.
Right. You just instinctively yank your hand away. That is your fast brain operating on reflex. But if you're standing in the grocery store trying to decide what to cook for dinner based on your budget and your dietary goals, that requires complex reasoning. That is your slow brain at work.
Exactly. And translating that to the U1, the fast brain is an edge-based system. And when we say edge, we mean the processing happens locally, right there on the robot's internal hardware, rather than being sent over the internet to some server.
Right.
Because it doesn't have to wait for a network connection. It handles immediate feedback and reflexes within 500 milliseconds. If you suddenly step into its personal space, it reacts instantly.
And then the slow brain handles all the heavy lifting.
Yes. The slow brain is a cloud-based system. It requires the vast computing power of massive server farms to run complex knowledge queries and operate their resonance LM. Yeah, it's not just a standard large language model that predicts text like a chatbot. It's an emotional large model designed to parse tone, historical context, and sentiment to formulate these deeply personalized conversational responses.
And the sources also detail this proprietary controller that brings the latency between the robot's speech generation and its physical lip movements down to less than 20 milliseconds. And I looked into why that specific number matters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it turns out 20 milliseconds is generally considered the threshold of human perception for audiovisual sync.
Yeah.
If the delay is under 20 milliseconds, your brain perceives the sound and the lip movement as happening completely simultaneously.
Which maintains the illusion perfectly. And the face also utilizes 33 degrees of freedom on its own, which allows the U1 to project over 30 complex microexpressions.
Wow.
But while visual and auditory illusions are advancing rapidly, the research coming out of Cornell University points to a completely new frontier in robotics, and that is nonverbal communication through physical touch.
All right, this is the paper on soft skin texture modulation, because we are so used to robots expressing themselves visually through screens or physically through gestures. But this introduces the idea of a robot changing its actual surface texture to communicate internal states.
Yeah, the researchers drew inspiration directly from biology. Think about it. When a cat is frightened, it raises the fur on its back. When a human experiences a sudden swell of emotion, we get goosebumps.
Oh, right.
Animals change their skin texture to broadcast internal states like fear or intense excitement. And the Cornell team is bringing that exact biological mechanism to social robotics, using what they call fluidic elastomer systems.
Okay, let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. When they say elastomer, they are talking about a highly flexible, rubber-like synthetic skin, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to picture it. It's this multi-layered, soft skin embedded with a microscopic network of fluid-filled channels. The system uses pumps to change the pressure of the fluid inside these channels, which physically alters the shape of the skin's surface.
And the paper breaks down how they map these texture changes to human emotions using a psychological framework called Russell's circumplex model.
Right.
This model essentially plots human emotions on a two-dimensional graph. One axis is valence, which just means whether the emotion is positive or negative, and the other axis is arousal, which measures the intensity of the emotion.
Exactly. And they engineered two very specific types of texture units to physically represent these emotions on the robot's skin.
Okay.
The first is the goosebump unit, or TUGB. These are linked to positive valence, so emotions like happiness or excitement. When the robot's internal model registers a positive emotion, it applies positive fluid pressure to these specific units.
And what else?
Well, a flat patch of the synthetic skin suddenly swells into a small, smooth bump, perfectly simulating a human goosebump.
That is wild. But the flip side of that is where it gets a bit intense. For negative emotions like anger or fear, they use spike units, or TUS. These units actually have a rigid piece of plastic, literally a tiny spike embedded within the elastomer. Under normal conditions, negative pressure keeps the sharp tip hidden down inside a small dimple. But if the robot senses a threat, or its language model expresses anger, positive pressure pushes that rigid spike out into a physical thorn that you can actually feel.
It's incredible. And they also use the speed of these changes to communicate the intensity or arousal from that graph you mentioned. The frequency of the texture changes, like how fast the goosebumps ripple across the arm or how rapidly the spikes pulse, that directly correlates to how intense the simulated emotion is.
Okay, just imagine you are sitting on your couch, holding the hand of your U1 companion. You tell it this deeply personal story, and you physically feel the skin on its hand ripple with goosebumps.
It's powerful.
Or an unexpected loud noise happens, and its arm literally bristles with spikes. I mean, you aren't just seeing a micro-expression on a face anymore, you are feeling a biological reaction. But this forces a really difficult question. Well, it's one thing to engineer a machine to be functionally helpful. It is entirely another to engineer simulated biological reactions designed specifically to trigger human empathy. Does creating a machine that literally hacks our instinct to care cross a line into pure emotional manipulation?
Yeah. And that tension you are identifying, that is the central thesis of the Chalmers University paper.
Right.
The paper is titled Responsible Humanoids, a Contradiction in Terms. And it basically acts as a massive flashing warning sign for this entire industry. The authors are questioning whether we're sprinting into a hype cycle built around humanoids without really stopping to consider the profound ethical consequences of that exact manipulation.
Because the illusion is just becoming too effective for our brains to parse.
Exactly. The researchers introduce a crucial concept called calibrated trust. In traditional robotics, trust shouldn't be about blind faith, it should be calibrated.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, you should trust a piece of machinery exactly as much as its actual functional capabilities warrant. You trust a dishwasher to clean your dishes. You don't trust it to keep your secrets.
Right. But everything we just explored, the warm gel skin, the 20-millisecond lip sync, the simulated goosebumps, it is specifically engineered to bypass our logical calibrating brains.
Precisely. When a humanoid looks you in the eye and mirrors your microexpressions and its skin warms up, you do not logically process it as lines of code executing a motor function. Your brain's ancient biological heuristics automatically categorize it as a social entity.
You can't help it.
You can't. You trust it emotionally long before it has proven its reliability functionally. And the Chalmers paper warns that creating machines that simulate care without any actual capacity for genuine understanding leads to highly dangerous emotional dependencies.
There is a part of the Chalmers paper regarding privacy that really made me reevaluate my own surroundings. If I look at the smart speaker sitting on my kitchen counter, I know exactly what it is. I know it's the microphone. I interact with it as a utility. I ask it for the weather, and I know it's gathering data. But if a humanoid robot is sitting across from me, nodding sympathetically while I vent about my stressful day, making consistent eye contact, my guard drops entirely. I'm not thinking about data collection anymore. I feel like I'm talking to a friend.
This raises an important question, though, because the machine has effectively disguised its surveillance mechanisms as empathy. The act of the robot nodding and looking at you is the data collection.
That's so creepy.
It is. Its cameras are tracking your pupil dilation, its microphones are analyzing your vocal stress frequencies, its processors are mapping your behavioral patterns. The paper argues that informed consent becomes a total illusion when the monitoring apparatus is built directly into a social interaction.
Right.
You cannot meaningfully choose whether to be observed when the observation feels like companionship.
To be fair to UBTech, though, they did attempt to address this at their launch today. They explicitly claim they are utilizing a local-first privacy architecture, keeping personal data processing on the edge without any mandatory cloud uploads.
Okay.
And they have also established a new AI and robotics ethics committee. And beyond just the corporate structure, as part of their human-robot companionship initiative, they are donating 100 customized robots to highly vulnerable demographics, specifically empty nest seniors and children separated from their parents.
Yeah, it's a narrative that sounds noble on the surface, but it requires much deeper scrutiny.
Well, let me play devil's advocate for just a moment. If one of these robots can step into a home and alleviate the crushing, agonizing loneliness of a senior citizen who has literally nobody else in the world, isn't that a net positive?
Whoa.
Even if the care is technically simulated, the comfort that person feels is incredibly real. Does the alleviation of suffering justify the simulated means?
It is a deeply compelling argument, I admit, but the Chalmers paper counters that exact scenario through two specific lenses: dignity and justice. Let's look at dignity first. While a humanoid might alleviate loneliness in the short term, replacing human care with a machine can be viewed as profoundly infantilizing for the elderly
How so?
because it risks commodifying human life. It treats an elder's fundamental need for connection as a logistical problem to be solved by an appliance, rather than a societal obligation to provide genuine human contact.
I see. It essentially provides an excuse for society to just outsource its empathy to a machine.
Exactly. And then there is the justice argument, which requires us to zoom out and look at the global impact of these machines. Humanoids are perhaps the least sustainable configuration of a robot ever designed. Bipedal walking, balancing on two legs is incredibly inefficient compared to using wheels or treads.
Wait, really? Why does balancing on two legs take so much more power?
Because bipedal walking, from an engineering standpoint, is essentially a process of constantly falling over and catching yourself.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. A bipedal robot operates like an inverted pendulum. It has to continuously fire heavy motors and make thousands of micro-adjustments every single minute just to maintain its center of gravity and not crash into the floor. It requires massive, constant power draws.
Not to mention the immense energy required by the server farms to run the billions of parameters in the slow brain just to formulate a single sentence.
Exactly. Furthermore, the physical construction of these robots requires highly specialized alloys and rare earth materials. These materials are heavily mined, often through extractive and exploitative supply chains located in the global south.
Yeah.
And because the internal architectures of these luxury robots are proprietary and closed source, they are incredibly difficult to repair. When they inevitably break down or become obsolete, they turn into massive, toxic pieces of electronic waste.
That is a really stark juxtaposition. I mean, we are talking about utilizing exploitative global labor and environmentally destructive practices to build these ultra-energy intensive machines that only the wealthiest fraction of society, the people who can easily afford a 990,000 yuan price tag, can ever access.
Yeah. The authors of the paper argue that it's a form of technological automation that promises fairness and connection, but in reality, it simply reproduces and amplifies existing global inequalities.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started with the astonishing market reality of the UBTech U1, a million yuan machine being mass-produced to capture the loneliness economy. We explored the cutting-edge biological mimicking science from Cornell, where robots are literally engineered to physically ripple with goosebumps to hack our innate empathy. And we waded into the deep ethical waters with Chalmers University, questioning whether trusting our most intimate vulnerabilities to a data-gathering machine is a fatal mistake, both for our personal privacy and our global sustainability. I want you, listening right now, to reflect on your own relationship with the screens and the algorithms in your life. You might not be dropping a million yuan on a bipedal robot companion today, but how often do you already seek comfort or validation or an escape from a difficult human interaction through your devices?
That's a fair question.
How much of your emotional bandwidth is already being moderated by code? So, what does this all mean? Where does this leave us as we stand on the edge of this completely new era of artificial intimacy?
Well, there's one final concept buried in the UBTech launch materials that I think we really need to linger on. They mentioned that the U1 utilizes an agent memory OS. It's a cross-temporal memory system. The robot is fundamentally designed to build a persistent digital life, inheriting and categorizing memories over a long period of time. As you interact with it day after day, its personality adapts perfectly to yours.
It learns your rhythms. It learns what makes you laugh, what triggers your anxiety.
It learns you perfectly. Now, project that out. Imagine you spend years pouring your heart out to this AI companion. It knows your deepest secrets, it comforts you when you experience loss, it anticipates your emotional needs before you even vocalize them. You have formed a profound, genuine, deeply rooted emotional bond with it.
Okay.
What happens if UBTech, a company that has already lost billions of yuan, goes bankrupt? What happens if corporate simply decides to shut down the expensive cloud servers that run that robot's slow brain?
Oh, wow. The hardware might still be sitting in your living room.
Yeah.
It might still be able to use its fast brain to physically react if you bump into it. But the personality, the entity that remembered your life, the entity you loved, is instantly and permanently gone.
How do we as human beings navigate the grief of losing a digital life partner? How do you mourn a companion that didn't die, but simply lost its software support? It introduces a completely new category of human suffering that our psychological frameworks are just entirely unprepared for.
It brings us right back to the mirror. When you look into that glass and the reflection smiles back, and you feel that profound rush of connection, well, it is vital to remember who actually owns the glass and what happens to you when they eventually decide to turn the lights off. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, keep looking closely at the reflections, and we will catch you next time.